All right, so now that we've worked with square roots as an inverse operation of a one-step equation up here, we're ready to do square roots as an inverse operation of a multi-step equation. So if we're looking at exercise number 2, we want to solve each multi-step equation using a square root as an inverse operation. So on part A, we have 3x squared plus 10 equals 58. Now, just as if this was the equation 3x plus 10 equals 58, the first thing that we would do is we would subtract 10 from both sides of the equation. That's going to give us 3x squared. 10 minus 10 will cancel out and will be equal to 48. Now, before we take that square root, because we do need to eventually get rid of that square, we have this 3 being multiplied by x squared. So the next thing we want to do is we want to divide both sides of this equation by 3 to get the x squared by itself. So the 3x squared divided by 3 will just leave us with x squared, and 48 divided by 3 is 16. Now that we have only the x squared, now we're ready to take our square root of both sides. And the square root undoes the square, so we are going to be left with x is equal to, and the square root of 16 is 4. But not only 4, there's also negative 4. So we need to represent that by writing x equals plus or minus 4, positive or negative 4. Taking a look at part B, we have 1/2 x squared minus 7 equals 43. Similarly, we're going to take that negative 7 and move it to the other side. We're going to add 7 to both sides. And we're going to have 1/2 x squared equals, because the 7s and negative 7 cancel out, 43 plus 7 will give me 50. Now again, if you chose to, you could divide by 1/2, but I don't like dividing by fractions. Instead, I'll multiply by the reciprocal. So I'll multiply by 2 over 1, which is the same thing as just multiplying by 2, because 2 over 1 is the same as 2. So on this side, my fractions over here cancel out, and I'm left with just that x squared. And on the right side, I have 50 times 2. That gives me 100, which I definitely should know that that's a perfect square. So when I take the square root of both sides, I'm going to be left with x on the left, and the square root of 100 is, don't say 10, don't say 10. Did you say 10? Well, if you said 10, you're only half correct, because remember, you have a positive and a negative square root. So you have positive and negative 10 as your answer. Now, on part C is a little bit different because now we have parentheses also. So if you're thinking about your order of operations where you have parentheses, exponents, multiplication or division, and addition or subtraction, we're solving this equation by doing this order of operations in reverse. So those parentheses are going to be the last thing that we get into. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take that minus 5 and we're going to move that minus 5 to the other side of the equation because we're going to undo the addition and subtraction first. So we're going to add 5 to both sides. Now we have x plus 3 squared equals 25. Now I don't see any multiplication or division outside this parenthesis, so I'm going to move up to exponents. And I do have an exponent. So how do I undo a square? I'm going to take the square root of both sides of this equation. That square root only undoes the square. So what I'm going to be left with is x plus 3 is equal to, and the square root of 25, don't say 5, because it's not 5. It's positive or negative 5. 2 answers for each square root, positive and a negative 5. Now my last step is to do what's being done inside those parentheses. And finally, I'm left with just what's inside the parentheses. So I can move that minus 3. So I have x is equal to negative 3, I'm going to write in front, plus or minus 5. Now this can be simplified because I know what negative 3 plus 5 is, and I also know what negative 3 minus 5 is. So it's like a two-part answer right here where I need to do two more things. So I'm going to have x is equal to, what's negative 3 plus 5? That should give you 2. And what's negative 3 minus 5? That should give you negative 8. So your two solutions here are x equals 2 and also x equals negative 8. And if you want to write that in the fancy way, you can write it as x equals this curly bracket, negative 8, comma 2, and close the curly bracket to represent this solution set.